Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We begin today with a glimpse at the diversity of plant life in Vermont. There are more than 2,800 plant species in the state. Most of them are flowering plants, but there are also plants like ferns and mosses. Our plants provide crucial habitat for wildlife, and they're a food source for most animals. In addition to the common plants we know or recognize, there are also some 600 rare and uncommon native plant species, including more than 150 that are threatened or endangered. Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin tells us more.
Vermont's landscape is full of plants and flowers that even an untrained eye would recognize, such as red clover, sumac, and our state tree, the sugar maple. But look closer, and you might see something a little more unusual.
There's 3 federally endangered plants that have occurred in Vermont.
Botanist Bob Popp works for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, keeping track of the rare and endangered plants in the state.
More or less about 440 that are rare, endangered, and threatened. And of those, there's 161 that are actually legally protected on the endangered and threatened species list.
On this day, Popp is giving a talk at the Rokeby Museum in Ferrisburg, focusing on those plants.
These are not plants that people routinely see because, by definition, they are rare. And some of them occur in 1 or 2 locations in the entire state.
Audience members range from experienced conservation volunteers
inspired to be a detective. Now that I know what is rare, I want to find more of it.
To interested outdoors enthusiasts.
It would be a good feeling for many rock climbers if they could be out there also looking for habitats and rare plants.
Charlotte resident Gray Beretta is an avid rock climber and wants to know more about identifying what he sees in the woods.
My interest is finding rare, unusual anything in the woods, whether it's a rock formation like they have back here, or just a combination of trees that you don't normally see. So it's finding how diversity makes and displays itself in the wild, and then kind of trying to bring that back to my work.
Beretta is also a farmer, and this knowledge will inform the way he interacts with the land he works on.
I loved how, as much as we figure out ways as farmers to make something productive every year, it's another reason why we should have diversity.
While some species are becoming more rare because of changes in climate and habitat, Vermont's unique geology is also a contributor.
A lot of these plants in Vermont are rare because they require very, very specialized habitats. And Vermont, as you probably know, and most of your viewers probably know, has a lot of limestone. So we have things like in the Champlain Valley and even on the Waits River Formation in the Connecticut Valley that don't really occur anywhere else in New England.
I am a big picture person, so I go out and look at whole landscapes and patterns and why things grow where they do. And he's good at answering that as well, like connecting the rare plant to calcium in the water that comes from the rocks. So I like the way he tells the stories about these plants.
Alicia Daniel is a naturalist for the city of Burlington. Having rare species in city limits presents challenges for stewardship.
What are the significant rare plants in Burlington? How can we steward them? You know, what do they need? You know, how can we not just run roughshod over where they are? And in our city, there are a number of them, and one of them, for instance, that I have always appreciated is the yellow lady slipper. And so when you get this charismatic, beautiful orchid in your backyard and you get to go out and see it and you feel like you're almost in the tropics or something, it makes you appreciate even the little things that are out there that are unusual and rare.
After the talk, Daniel and plant conservation volunteer Kate Cruzy showed me some examples of rare plants here in Burlington.
Lake Champlain used to be connected to an ocean. We still have relict maritime plants around Lake Champlain.
Cruzy and her fellow volunteers work around Vermont, helping Pop and his colleagues at the Department of Fish and Wildlife identify rare plants and collecting seeds.
I've always been a plant geek my whole life and lived in various corners of Vermont. I work for the New England Wildflower Society as a plant conservation volunteer. And the state botanists, Bob being the senior state botanist, prioritizes what are the rare plant populations they want to confirm are still here in the state, or are they not still here.
The species Cruzy looks for are extremely remote or haven't been seen for many years.
And it's all about finding those natural communities and locations and understanding the natural communities that you see. And so I keep learning and honing those skills. Those are still new skills for me, but they're logical. If you get out there often, you start to see the patterns and know, oh, I have a good chance of finding that creamy vetchling here because this is the same habitat in which I found it before.
And this is a very unusual habitat along freshwater in New England. You see it along ocean coasts, but it's kind of uncommon around lakes. So here we have it, and it's ideal for this particular rare plant.
Cruzy and Daniel both admit that identifying rare plants can be tricky, even for those that, like them, have a lot of experience. Going to talks and field trips with experts like Pop helps stay on top of new discoveries.
It's called the northeastern bulrush because it's pretty much endemic to the Northeast. We do get reports from the public, like amateurs, and we made some great discoveries from just interested amateurs and things who thought they saw something, and in some cases it turns out to be right, and that's kind of awesome.
He showed us that extremely rare plant that someone found along the shores of Lake Champlain, and it's just exciting. It's exciting. Here's something no one saw for 100 years, and then someone found it again. So I'm all about diversity. I love everything that lives here now. I'd love for it to live here in the future, and so his approach to using rare plants kind of as a test of how we're doing in saving our wild world is so important to me.
While many of the plants that are rare in Vermont may be common somewhere outside of the state, Pop says that's not a reason to stop paying attention to what's going on here.
It's part of Vermont's heritage. I mean, these plants have been here, they've maybe always been rare, but if they're gone, then, they're not part of Vermont anymore, and we have to go to New York or the Midwest or Canada to see them. And that would be, to me, that'd be a terrible loss.
It's a treasure hunt through Vermont's landscape that has a prize you can't put a price on. In Ferrisburg, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Rebecca. If you grow any kind of plant, you know that no matter what you're growing or where you're growing it, soil is your most important ally. To prove the point about the importance of soil, the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service provides a demonstration. Keith Silva explains.
It's going in a lot easier.
Aaron Pratt and Sarah LaRose are soil conservationists with the National Resources Conservation Service in St. Albans.
This is usually like the hardest sample to get because it doesn't hold together because there's no roots.
Pratt and LaRose are looking for a soil sample to be used in a rainfall simulator. They're digging in this cornfield to find a good example of a common agricultural practice.
So this is a sample from a cornfield that's been in corn continuously for 40 years.
This sample will be used to show how much water runs off and infiltrates the soil when 2 inches of rain falls on it per hour.
This is a rainfall simulator, and the buckets in front basically are going to show the runoff from the different types of soil samples that we have here, and the buckets in the back are going to show the infiltration rates to the different types of soils that we have.
The sample from the cornfield goes alongside another similar example of exposed and aggressively tilled soil. There are also 2 other soil samples in this demonstration. Both of those examples represent ground that's received minimal tillage and has been managed using cover crops. Once the simulation starts and the water begins to soak in, or not, The results are obvious.
It's such a good visual of where your soil is going when it's not covered that it might make them think twice about just tilling everything up and leaving everything bare, because the soil is basically what they need in order to make their crops. And if the soil keeps leaving their properties, then they're basically losing their own livelihood.
The practice of growing the same crop on the same acreage year after year is known as monocropping. In addition to increasing the chance for erosion, monocropping also decreases soil health. Rotational grazing, growing different crops on the same acreage, increases soil health, promotes biodiversity, and keeps the ground covered to prevent erosion.
This is a simulator. It gives us that visual. It helps us understand what is going on in that rainstorm. It boils down those messages about cover, about diversity of different crops, about the importance of having roots in the soil, different roots, diversity of roots, all those really important things that make a healthy living soil. That is what we can see as we're running this rainfall simulator. We can see the results of that and why it can help us keep our lake clean. It can help us have water in our soils for those drought times. You know, it really helps us both in terms of production on the farm, but then also in reducing those environmental impacts off of the farm.
The greatest asset of every farm is its topsoil. It's in those top 2 to 8 inches where a farmer's fortunes are won or lost. Impacts like planting and plowing, farming, expose topsoil. So making sure those practices are properly managed goes a long way to improving soil health.
What I'm trying to turn this into, it's going to look visually like chocolate cake. It's going to look so good you want to eat it.
Eric Noel raises beef cattle on Health Hero Farm in South Hero. Noel is a longtime practitioner of soil conservation techniques like pasturing, crop rotation, and minimal tillage.
I always look for root causes, because you find a root cause of something, you fix that, and you take care of a lot of other problems around once you find the root cause. And I figured out that you fix the soil, you get the fertility up, and you get it so it's like chocolate cake, and it'll infiltrate, and you get increased forage volume, increased nutrient density in the forage, which goes to getting more feed into the cattle, more nutrient dense feed into the cattle, which increases their weight gain. So it goes to the bottom line of the beef production also.
Noel and his family moved from a farm in Highgate to this farm in South Hero about 1.5 years ago. When they started getting the land ready for production, Noel knew it was going to take something heroic to get the soil to meet his needs.
This is our second growing season, and last year what we started with was nutrients that were very low, especially phosphorus, which is energy into the plant. And over the course of 2 growing seasons, we've done some amendments and some practices, and year on year we've increased the weight gain on cattle by 15%. Last year we were topping out about 1.7 pounds a day gain. This year we're pretty close to 2 pounds a day gain on the cattle, which is what I want.
Noel knows what he does with his soil goes beyond his farm gate and puts him on the same footing as his fellow Vermonters.
No matter where you are, you're in a watershed, and when the rain falls, it's going to end up someplace. So it matters to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a farmer, if you're a landowner, a developer, or somebody that lives in the city. It doesn't matter. If you've got land and water hits it and rain hits it, you need to be thinking about this stuff, because the water is going to end up someplace. If you're not utilizing it and soaking it up where you are, it's going to run off for the most part, because a lot of the practices we use right now with farming and development and roads and highways, they don't think about what the water's doing.
This demonstration proves there's nothing muddy about this debate.
There's no way to hide it. There's no way to say, well, that really isn't the issue. It's very clear, or not so clear.
When it comes to the conservation of natural resources, everyone is on even ground. In South Hero, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you for joining us. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.